So thanks everybody for joining us. We're here, Ynse and I, to talk a bit about the technologies that we see helping us and helping clients doing the energy transition. I'm Lewis. I'm based out of London. I lead our M&A practice and our strategy practice. And CDP is a great partner of ours that I'm happy to have today to bring to you the latest that we have on carbon management and to understand as well your needs. We have Ynse, which is our Vice President for carbon. He'll be doing most of the talk, and we are Envision. Ynse will also touch on that, on who we are, and I hope everybody enjoys. We'll be talking for 15 minutes, more or less, and then we'll have another 15 minutes to interact. So questions are super welcome, and we're looking forward to that. And without further ado, Ynse, over to you, and thank you all for joining.
Thank you very much, Lewis, and good morning, afternoon, everyone. Indeed, my name is Ynse. I'm with you here from Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and thanks for starting on the mark. Yeah, so if the question really is what is the role of technologies in accelerating that transition to net zero emissions? If we move to the next page, Arthur, I mean, the way I would summarize it, really is technology provides both the direction and the traction in the transition to net zero emissions. And I'll tell you a bit more about that in the next 10 minutes or so. But first, allow me to introduce our business, Envision Digital. We're a global leader in decarbonization technology. Providing end-to-end digital systems for decarbonization to boost, on the one hand, efficiency on the consumption side, whilst also helping to reduce carbon footprint. Our Envision operating system brings together both hardware and software in a cloud-based platform that optimizes buildings and transportation systems on the downstream, the consumption side, and at the same time optimizes the management of renewable generation assets, whilst also reducing energy consumption and cost. About 1,200 people globally in about 41 countries. To give you a bit of an idea, over 220 million devices and sensors and connected across the globe, and over 550 gigawatts of renewable, so that's wind and solar assets that our software manages every second of the day. If we move to the next page, back to that summary, technology providing both direction and attraction for that transition to net zero emission. Let's start with technology providing the direction. When you think about it, any transition to net zero emissions in the end comprises of a couple of typical milestones. You need to figure out where you are and where you're heading. You'll need to figure out how to get from A to B. And once you're going, you'll want to figure out how you're tracking and trailing along your way from A to B. Now, along a couple of these steps, technology really plays a critical role, starting with monitoring one's carbon footprint. This has typically been a hugely manual undertaking, sending emails back and forth, Excel spreadsheets, shooting from left to right. And this is the starting point where technology kicks in, with cloud platforms that allow you to combine activity level data with global databases of emission factors, APIs connecting with ERP systems, sourcing data and streamlining the sourcing of data, and increasingly one of the things that Envision Digital is keen on, also to source data from those devices, those machines. Again, hundreds of millions of them by now. So using technology to source that data, not only to get visibility of your footprint, but also then to make that insightful, to provide that data in reports, annual sustainability reports, Carbon Disclosure Project, our partner in this matter, and streamline those data feeds for reporting purposes. Then obviously set your science-based targets. And once it's clear where you are and what targets are, it's a matter of figuring out, what is the series of initiatives and projects that you want to undertake to make it from where you are to where you want to be, your abatement initiatives, all collectively combined in an abatement roadmap. Now, that is something that you'll want to figure out initially. So what are those initiatives? But equally important also to continue to keep pulse. How is each of those initiatives actually performing in real life? If you had anticipated and budgeted for an energy efficiency project, you will want to know if you had anticipated savings of 100, whether indeed you are saving 100 or whether it's only 80 or 120. Same for solar projects, electrifying mobility, and so on. And I'll touch on that in a brief while. If we move to the next page, if I talked about the programmatic and the strategic way sort of approaches that leverage technology, there's also the more operational side of things. And this is really about technology providing the traction in these transitions to net zero emissions. So about making the actual step that comprise this abatement roadmap and bridge that gap between where you are today and the targets that you've set. And interestingly, when you think about it, making these actual steps, these are quite typical things that any organization will go about. They're on the one hand, on the consumption side, all about electrifying energy consumption, shifting from gas to electricity to heat pumps, shifting from internal combustion cars to electric fleets and so on, and reducing that consumption at the same time. On the other hand, this is about what I would call decarbonizing the energy supply, renewable energy generation. And then interestingly, because of these new patterns of consumption and these new patterns of generation, with increasing volatility, there's an increasing mismatch between generation and consumption. So there's an increasing need for energy storage. And because these are electrons bouncing from left to right, with no patience for people to make decisions, it is here again that technology really plays a critical role in not only optimizing the individual systems of buildings or electric vehicles or wind turbines and so on, but also to orchestrate that as an integrated energy system in real time. And technology there is absolutely critical and inevitable because these things go way too fast for the human mind to grasp and to actually manage. Now, perhaps I'll give you two brief examples of each of these two typical applications, starting with technology providing direction in this transition to net zero emission. What we see is an increasing complex optionality of things that organizations can do to reduce their carbon emissions. And when I say reduce their carbon emissions, those can be carbon emissions of organizations themselves. Those can also be carbon emissions, for example, that government institutions feel responsible for, or they can be carbon emissions, for example, that financial institutions finance. The range of initiatives and the options that organizations have to invest in and to activate is rapidly increasing, and there's a rapidly increasing need, therefore, to figure out what if I were to go and embark on these 10 initiatives versus these 10 initiatives. What gives me the biggest bang for the buck? So figuring out and weeding through that optionality is something that technology, data, AI plays an increasing role in. But then at least as important is once organizations embark on these initiatives, how are you going to keep track of these? Any organization starting on their journey will typically start with a handful or so projects or abatement initiatives. Before you know it, an organization, especially the multinational ones, will be looking at lists of tens, if not hundreds of individual projects rooftop solar projects, electrifying mobility, energy efficiency project, ABC, and keeping track of these individual projects, keeping track of the consolidated impact of these projects, being able to identify the good, well-performing initiatives from the not so well-performing initiatives is really important. Organizations want to be able to double down on those initiatives that perform well and give them a good bang for their buck. And they want to be able to steer away for the ones that don't. Take that cash and reinvest it in the ones that do perform well. So again, this is where cloud software, what I mentioned before, an ability to collect all the data, streamline the data collection, use AI to establish more clear relationships between cause and effect is increasingly important. So again, technology to figure out how you're threading, where you're heading, and how you're doing. Let's move to the next page and give you a brief example of the other application of technology, really to make the traction and reduce those carbon emissions themselves. And over there, I'll use the work we do with the Port of Singapore, PSA, Port of Singapore Authority. And the journey there is actually quite typical for what we see at the same time with ports in other parts of the world. Port of Antwerp, we work with, for example, or airports. And it's a move from managing siloed devices, siloed asset management, into integrated, digitally optimized new energy systems. In the case of the Port of Singapore, there's cranes that lift the containers. They've been electrified. The Port of Singapore is in the process of electrifying their so-called AGVs, their automated guided vehicles. They're driving around with these containers. There's loads of buildings and properties at the port that are running energy efficiency projects. At the same time, there's an increasing volume of on-site renewable energy generation assets. There's stationary batteries. Obviously, there's the batteries in those electrified AGVs. And whereas the work with PSA started with connecting and managing the individual devices, make sure that the solar assets do maximize their power output, make sure that the cranes do operate optimally, that the buildings do cool themselves in the most optimal way. The next step then was to connect all of that into this integrated new energy system using Envision operating system to be able to, for example, predict spikes in energy consumption in the future. And perhaps, Arthur, move to the next page to just give a sneak view of what this looks like in real life. Connect everything that consumes, like the buildings, etc. Connect it with day-ahead forecast of weather, of the energy markets. So, for example, to be able to predict spikes in consumption, anticipate them by, for example, charging the batteries, so to avoid having to take energy from the main grid when the prices are high, and rather do it the other way around. Charge when prices are low, discharge when prices are high. So this is an example, and we see this again in many places of applying technology and data and AI to connect with all these devices and manage this new energy system in real life. Let's move to the last page there, Arthur, because there's an important thing happening now in these two worlds of, on the one hand, the more programmatic strategic applications of technology, and on the other hand, the more operational universe. For one, when you take a step back, you can imagine that this programmatic strategic application typically has a clock speed of years. This is about annual reporting in sustainability reports, annual reporting to carbon disclosure project and the likes. At the same time, these new energy systems, they have a clock speed of split seconds. These programmatic views typically run by sustainability managers, by procurement managers, strategy departments, whilst the new energy systems are run by people in operations, in facilities, supported by IT, by digital departments. We see these two worlds, whilst they hardly come together, we see them converge now with one simple reason and one simple catalyst, and it is, again, technology and data. When you think about it, both have an increasing need for increasingly reliable and actionable data, increasingly granular, increasingly frequent. The example of PSA illustrates how these new energy systems have a critical need for real-time, super granular data to be able to figure out literally where to send the electrons to. At the same time, in this net zero program universe, for example, regulators increasingly require data ever more frequently, ever more granular. Activity level data is the gold standard. Already in the greenhouse gas protocol, we see the BREEAMs, the LEEDs for their highest tier building certifications require metered energy and carbon emission data, for example, as the standard. And both in the end tap into the same set of data, obviously. And it's that convergence of using the same and having the need for the same set of data, really that sets these two parts of organizations to go and start to work together. Actually, Arthur, I'd like to leave it with that, and perhaps just turns to some of the questions in the audience, if that's okay with you.
All right. Well, thanks, Ynse. I think as we're talking about speed and efficiency, and talking about how we can help clients all over the world doing that, I think that was also a very speedy presentation that kind of covers everything. So I'd like to open the floor for questions. If you can just type it on the chat, we'll be taking the questions. And in the meantime, I'd like to start with one, Ynse, that's from my side. So it's a very simple one, right? The world of reporting is becoming more and more demanding. So what are the changes that technologies can help us with, and how can it help the life of clients and companies to respond to that demand?
Yeah, you're spot on indeed. In this whole space of carbon emission reporting or greenhouse gas emission reporting, everything is moving in one direction and one direction only. It is more frequent data requirements of more granular data. It's very simple. It's only moving in one direction. So there are essentially two ways in which technology is increasingly helping what we see. One is, again, like what I mentioned earlier on, the sourcing of data, the application of APIs is very rapidly increasing. The ability to seamlessly connect with ERP systems, etc., is rapidly increasing. But probably even more important, the ability to connect with millions of devices, and not only connect to them, but also be able to communicate with them. Because again, let's not forget, your typical OEM brand A, cannot talk to your typical OEM brand B versus brand C versus brand D equipment. So using artificial intelligence to seamlessly connect with millions of devices and then also communicate with them and verify whether the data is accurate, whether the data is reliable, really is important. And AI has now cracked that code. So that's on the getting the data side of things. Then there's the providing the data side of things. And there are initiatives like the recent one that CDP launched and that Envision Digital participates in, then to also automate and streamline making that data available to reporting platforms such as CDP, make a big difference to organizations in reducing the time spent on data collection, data reporting, so to be able to spend more time on the actual value add of, where are the emissions, where can we reduce, where can we create value.
Thanks for that, Ynse. We're having a lot of questions popping up. Very good one from Albert Plesman. is, has PSA reduced their CO2 emissions? Did the Envision system manage to register that change?
Yeah, it's good to see Albert Plesman on this call. Hi, Albert. Good to hear from you. So the answer is yes, they did, and they didn't only reduce their carbon emissions, they also managed to reduce their energy bill, and these two things often go hand in hand. When you think about it, when our prices, and we've seen it in Europe now increasingly often, when our energy prices, electricity prices, I should say, the lowest, it's when there's an abundance of renewable energy feeding into the grid. So when it's windy and sunny, electricity prices, spot prices at least, they're lowest. So typically being able to source, the lowest electricity price on the spot market will also get you the lowest carbon intensity kilowatt hours on the spot market as well. So in that same spirit, the Port of Singapore has reduced not only their carbon footprint, but also their energy bill. And this is in buy low, sell high, whether it's buy low carbon intensity or buy low dollar intensity energy. At the same time, of course, this visibility of carbon emissions and energy consumption across this vast port, of course, also highlighted a growing number of opportunities to save. When you have visibility, you can't manage what you can't measure. As soon as you have that visibility, inefficiencies will become apparent, they will become clear, and that gives you the starting point to tackle some of these inefficiencies and reduce energy consumption, reduce carbon emissions.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And you say, Hassan Hon is asking about pain points. What is it that Envision Digital helps the client, solve?
Yeah.
Or the many reasons or the many things, right?
Yeah. So the essence of it really is to help get visibility of the integrated new energy system and carbon emissions universe. I mean, that is the essence of it. Get visibility, then be able to tackle and manage the individual nodes of it, squeeze more energy out of your renewable assets, squeeze more value out of your energy storage assets, and run more efficiently and more optimally everything on the consumption side, whether those are buildings, plants, or transportation systems. Then on the reporting side, taking all that data, which in the old days had to be gathered and collected manually, use that richness of data in the carbon emission system, not only for operational purposes, but also for your net zero program. So which initiatives can I undertake to reduce carbon emissions? How are they threatened? But also use that same data to report to the Carbon Disclosure Project, to report to your stakeholders, to help bring about the life cycle analysis of product A or B or C. So it's really about the collection of the data, the management of the data, and then the reporting of the data. And there's a whole host of stakeholders that have a need. For example, another one is financial institutions. I talked about regulators. I talked about reporting to, for example, CDP. Financial institutions really are now on top of this space of IoT for carbon emissions data to help them scale, for example, their sustainability-linked loans. They've very important need to be able to reduce the cost of data collection, to increase the reliability and the actionability of the data that their borrowers gather to be able to prove that the loan that they got indeed accomplished the carbon emission reduction, the carbon emission reductions that they had agreed upon.
Good stuff, you say. And in times of ChatGPT and the growth of AI, we have Osman Ödemis asking us how Envision uses AI for optimization and abatement, and if you can provide one example in which this entire process was done without human intervention.
Yeah. So in real time, this happens without human intervention, by the way, all the time. When there's simply no time for human intervention. When a renewable asset generates electricity, let's take some of the solar panels. We recently launched a great similar initiative with Nike at some of their distribution sites in Asia. Same thing as with the Port of Singapore. In real time, I'll give an example. An AGV driving around in the port. The visibility of the operational system of this AGV will be able to tell you where this AGV, this automated guided vehicle, will be at a certain point in time, what the state of charge will be of this AGV. Therefore, you will also be able to predict where the AGV will be by the time that the battery needs recharging. So you can anticipate for it. You can have the energy system anticipate for that, and make sure that without congestion on the local grid, that particular charging point will be able to charge that AGV at the time and the place when it will be there. And then back to the case that I mentioned about predicting consumption and anticipating that. If then, for example, you also know that the prices on the main grid will be high by the time that this AGV needs to be charged, why not already charge some of these stationary batteries right now, so to be able to charge that AGV using the power from that stationary battery rather than using the power from the grid, and simply benefit from price arbitrage.
Clear. Osman, let us know if you have any follow-up questions. Same for Hassan and Albert. Thanks for your questions. In the 2 minutes that we have left, we have discussed all the benefits, right? We discussed the positive side of everything of using AI, of the disclosure. I wanted to hear from you, what's the risk? What's the risk of not onboarding these technologies, not having this accuracy that you are talking about? What type of legal issues that can happen, marketing, or anything?
No, it's typically on two sides. There's opportunity cost and there's real cost. Real costs, they're obvious and they've been talked about many times. And I mean, time and again, we show all the fallout from instances of greenwashing, data that is not accurate, that's not reliable. Organizations getting fines for it. Cost of capital rising because banks become reluctant and start to price in the risk of companies providing dodgy data in this particular domain. So there's simply cost that you incur when you can't get it right. But there's also opportunity cost. The examples that I just now mentioned with banks, we're working with some of the largest banks in the world. These banks typically have millions of small, medium enterprise customers that they want to provide loans to, and preferably provide loans to that help these small, medium enterprises tackle climate change and reduce carbon emissions. Now, there is no way on the planet that any bank will be able to go and do this without the use of technology, notably the technology that we talked about over the past 20 minutes. Technology that allows you to seamlessly, rapidly connect with millions of devices, source that data, make it available reliably, actionably, without the human intervention of, say, auditors or certifiers, so that you can actually, again, reduce transaction cost and scale up these types of commercial propositions. And this is for banks, but we see it everywhere in the economy.
All righty, and we're on top of the hour. We're finishing on time. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for you, Ynse, to speaking with us, for CDP, for hosting us, and for everybody who joined the call. Thanks so much, and reach out to Ynse if you want to hear more. And Ynse, any final words?
Well, thank you for being a great moderator and host, Lewis, as always, and thanks, Arthur, behind the scenes for getting everything done and ready. And thanks to the audience for the interest, and obviously to CDP for providing the platform. Look forward to see you again in the near future. Bye, everyone.
Talk soon, you all. Bye.